Good evening and welcome to Spotlight on Education. I'm Dr. Joseph J. Sweeney, Superintendent of Schools in East Brunswick, and I have with me tonight Dr. David Seiden, a board member, and Dr. Kenneth Burnett, the principal of Memorial School. Our topic tonight is the state's Thorough and Efficient Education Law, commonly referred to as T&E. Dr. Seiden is the chairman of the board's T&E and Curriculum Committee, and Dr. Burnett is the coordinator of T&E in our school system. Ken, I'll start with you and ask you, how are we involved in T&E, and really what does it mean to the school system?
Well, let me give a little bit of historical perspective, Joe. The term T&E, or thorough and efficient, dates back over 100 years when the phrase that the state will provide a thorough and efficient school system for the state was inserted into the state constitution. It pretty much remained there until the late 60s when a lawsuit was brought against the state, charging that because of the then system of funding, the state in fact was not ensuring a thorough and efficient school system in all districts throughout the state. That suit was upheld in the courts, and as a result, the state funding and the laws governing the regulation of schools in the state was changed, and the so-called T&E law came into existence. Basically, I think the T&E law means three things to districts, or three major things. First, it mandates to all districts that they will maintain a process of setting goals, establishing curricular programs to carry out those goals, and then assessing or evaluating how well those programs are attaining or meeting those goals or objectives which the local boards have set. Secondly, the T&E process has mandated upon all districts a program called Basic Skills Improvement. This has required all districts to provide a system of remedial instruction or help to all students who fall below state standards in terms of reading, math, and communication. Lastly, the process has developed the means through the county offices of the state monitoring local districts to see to it how well they are carrying out the T&E law and other rules and regulations which are mandated either by law or by State Board of Education regulations.
Okay, I think that takes care of some of the history. David, how does your committee fit into that whole situation, T&E? How are you involved in it, and what do you do?
Well, Joe, as you know, one of the requirements under the T&E law is that there has to be community involvement in the review of curriculum. And our committee has among its membership some board members who are, of course, elected representatives of the community. And in addition, we have some other members of the community who have volunteered to serve on the committee. And then in addition to that, we have various members of the staff. The way the committee has functioned, starting back, I guess, in 1976, we set off first by trying to delineate, to establish what the goals of the East Brunswick school system are in terms of the various curricular areas. And it actually took about a year for those goals to be agreed upon. The committee developed them, and then they were forwarded on to the board, which then adopted them. Subsequently, in the following years, the committee, with a tremendous amount of help from Gene Travers, did what we called a needs assessment to try to ascertain what the needs of the community were in terms of attaining those goals, which goals were or were not being attained satisfactorily. We did this in two parts. First, we did what we called a perceived needs assessment, in which we polled the community, we polled the staff, and also the students, at least the students on the secondary level, to see what they perceived to be the needs of the district. That is, which curricular areas were most in need of a curricular review. We recognized that this was only a perception, an assessment of perceived needs, and so we added to that some more objective standards by looking at objective data such as test scores and so forth. And based upon these two reviews, the committee tried to establish some priorities as to which curricular areas were most in need of review, or at least should be looked at initially. And then over the next few years, or the next 3 years, I guess, we have, in fact, reviewed most of the major curricular areas in the system, including reading and math and English, foreign language, science, guidance, art, music, and a few others. The committee has been very fortunate in that it has had a representation from the community of some very, very good people. We have some community representatives who are very bright, very hardworking, and very dedicated to the whole concept of curriculum review. The committee, through these members, have established some very high goals. The philosophy pretty much is set your goals very high, and you'll have to work hard to achieve them, and you'll achieve more than you would otherwise. And I think we have been somewhat effective in doing that. There are a few members of the community who have been with the committee almost from its inception and have been very loyal in terms of persisting over the years and contributing in a very meaningful way, including Stan Katz, Peter Bernanos, Claire Steiger, Lorraine Schoenthaler, Howard Kimmel. And then, as I said, there are also board members on it. This past year, in addition to myself, we've had Eli Schneider and Joe Soreo, and we've had staff members contributing to the committee membership, including, aside from Ken Burnett, we've had Joanne Magistro and Bob Colangelo and Rocco Magliozzi and Dot Plotz. And then in addition to that, as the various curriculum areas were being reviewed, of course, staff members that worked in those particular areas have come and met with the committee to discuss the particular curriculum areas.
Well, would we go through a 5-year process, or is it a cycle? I've forgotten how that works. We go through the...
Yeah, the way the state mandated the T&E program is that there is a 5-year cycle. The cycle begins with the establishment of the goals, as I said, and then the next stage is the assessment of how well the district is attaining those goals or what the needs of the district are. And then there is a series of curriculum review processes, and then it finishes up with a re-review of how well curriculum modification has hit the target. And then the process starts all over again, and we're just at about that stage now, where we will once again be looking at the goals to see whether those goals have to be modified in view of whatever has changed in the community in the 5-year period.
Well, you've had some experience with it. How do you personally view the process? Do you believe in it?
Well, I very much believe in the concept of curriculum review. I think it goes without saying that curriculum review is essential. I think it also goes without saying that we in East Brunswick would be doing that whether the T&E law existed or not. But I think it's good that that aspect of it does exist, mandating us as well as all of the other districts in the state to do that. I think that the process, the bureaucratic procedure perhaps is more burdensome at times than it needs to be. But nonetheless, I think the basic concept is an important one and is a good one, and I certainly do believe in it.
How about you, Dr. Burnett? You've been through it from a different angle. Do you believe in the process?
I think my feelings are very much like Dave's in that I don't think the law has had really substantive differences or brought about great differences in what we've done as a district. Even before T&E, we did a great deal of program review, program evaluation. We had our own testing program to get some reading as to how effective our instructional programs were and how well children were doing. I guess in a sense it's brought about a bureaucratic formality to what we're doing in that now what we have been doing must be reported to the state on forms, and whether we in fact do things or not is monitored by the state.
Yeah, maybe you were here for some time, like myself. Maybe you could recall that many, many years ago, before TNE, we developed our own philosophy, if you recall that discussion back and forth with the board and finally came out, so we were a little bit ahead. What about the basic skills improvement? That's your area too.
Well, the Basic Skills Improvement Program, mandated under TNE, requires a local district to provide remedial services, and they use the term communication and computation, basically reading and math, for those children who fall below state minimal standards in reading and math tests, which are given in grades 3, 6, and 11. Since that time, the mandate has been increased to include children who fall in other grade levels, and while many districts have been forced to develop a testing program, we had one to fall back on. Again, were in a good position to initiate this, as just about the time the law came down the pike, we had begun hiring reading specialists for all the elementary schools and eventually the secondary schools. And of course, these reading specialists were the natural persons to pick up the instruction in the remedial sense for the children in reading. Since that time, we've added math specialists and have begun supplying the remedial instruction. And I think the effectiveness of our program is borne out by the fact that we have had fewer children fall below the state minimum guidelines each year that the test has been given. And I believe that district-wide, more than 90% of our children far exceed the minimal standards in reading and math.
Yeah, the last test we had, we looked very good. What about the paperwork? Many of the meetings I go to at superintendent's level, people, teachers, principals are always complaining about paperwork. You're dealing directly with the principals, are they, and the teachers. Are they still making the same kind of complaints as they did earlier about that?
Except in one area, I think the paperwork has improved and has been reduced. I think the state's been very sensitive to this charge. The first few years, there were probably in the neighborhood of 15 to 25 forms which had to be completed. And the first few years, not only did these have to be completed for the district as a whole, but many of the forms had to be done by each individual school. So there was a tremendous amount of duplication, and during those first few years, I heard many complaints from both principals and teachers. The second problem which has occurred, I think, with paperwork has been that the forms have been distributed by the state very late in the school year, either in April or May. So you sometimes found yourself at the end of a school year being required to complete a form and requesting data which you didn't anticipate being asked to supply at the beginning of the year. But for the past 2 years, the number of general forms has been reduced greatly. For instance, this year, the end of the year reports include only 4 forms, which were approved by the board at the last meeting. The one area in which forms and specificity has increased has been in the Basic Skills Improvement Program, where more forms, more documentation, and more data has been required by the state.
I want to ask both you and Dr. Seiden one other question, but how do you feel about the setup of the first time I ever saw the TNE program, and I saw it in a diagram, and the impression I had was that it looked like a wiring for a house or something with outlets and all that. But I think that Dr. Shine, the State Department, had a great deal to do with it, and then he left and became a superintendent of schools. But it was a very well thought out, logical, kind of sensible program that had difficulties as it proceeded. Do you think it's fulfilled its promise, the TNE program generally? And I think you could talk about the kind of thing that I was talking about, the way the philosophy was and how they outlined and diagrammed it, which I thought was very good. In actuality, how do you see it work in our school system?
Has it fulfilled its promise? If you take as its basic promise that it was to ensure a thorough and efficient school system in all districts, I'm really not too sure. In fact, I know I've read articles which indicate that Many of the districts which had poor districts 6 years ago continue to have poor districts with poor levels of achievement by the children. Dave, and perhaps you could correct me, I think in terms of funding, it has helped East Brunswick slightly and made for slightly better equalization in terms of the state aid we get. But again, my impression is nowhere come close to equalizing the funding between so-called poorer districts and richer districts.
Well, I might ask Dr. Seiden that too. Like, he has a little different viewpoint from us, that he's a college professor and on the board, and he may view it differently. Do you think that has advantages? That has it been helpful in a general way as you?
I think it has potential, had potential at its inception, and still does have potential for helping in the area of educational improvement, curriculum improvement particularly, and basic skills improvement, because it does superimpose or mandate on all districts a formalized procedure that you are accountable for back to Trenton, to the State Department. But relating it to East Brunswick in particular, I'm a little bit skeptical that it has accomplished very much that we wouldn't have accomplished without it. I think I personally feel good in terms of being able to see the curriculum review in progress. There are recommendations that the T&E committee have made to the board in terms of what we thought ought to be done to improve curriculum coordination, for one thing, which have been adopted by the board. So in that sense, I think it's worked. I agree with Ken from what I've understood, from what I've read about other districts around the state. It certainly has not fulfilled its promise to the districts that were most in need of support, both financial and curricular and educational support. In terms of funding for our own district, while certainly tied in with the T&E law was the state income tax, with its promise for much more state support of education. It's true that our aid has increased as a result of that, but not nearly to the level that was promised. The support that we're getting from state aid is well below the support that had been promised at the beginning. So I think it's a mixed bag. In some senses it has been helpful, but I don't think nearly as helpful as was anticipated at the outset.
Well, I think I'll ask you a real interesting question. We talked about the cycle, that we review the cycle every 5 years, and we're going to come into some new areas, and I'll ask the questions in two parts. One, what are we going to look forward to in the future? And Dr. Seiden, you could answer that, and then Ken. And then maybe the second part of that question, I guess that will be by agreement, but if you had your druthers, what would either one of you like to do in terms of improvement in the school system? Dr. Seiden?
Well, as I mentioned before, we are coming into the beginning of a new cycle. So there are a few things that the cycle requires us to do, and that is to relook at the goals and modify the goals if the committee and then the board deems that that's appropriate. But in addition to that, there will be an ongoing process of curriculum review. There are several curriculum areas that the committee, at its last meeting in June, agreed would be the curriculum areas for us to be looking at for this coming year. Included among them would be the library program. During this past year, we had a preliminary discussion with the staff from the library media centers at the various schools to discuss the methodology for reviewing the library program. And we're anticipating coming into this year with a rather complete review of the library program. In line with that, this might be an opportune time for us to take a look at some videotape that was shot at the library at Chittick School. It will show Joan Daskowitz, the librarian there, along with Dana Hilton, who is a parent volunteer working with some of the kids. I'd like to look at that perhaps because it in a tangible way indicates that the kinds of things that we do at meetings and at board meetings and committee meetings, talking about curriculum really does eventually get back and have some effect upon kids, which is really what it's all about. So perhaps we can take a look at that now.
Ken, do you want to make any commentary?
I think it might be appropriate to comment on the function of a library in at least in elementary school, and I would imagine it's consistent through secondary schools too. Certainly a school library performs most, if not all, the functions that a public library has. I'm not too sure whether it's a difference in focus or a different animal altogether. I think it's primarily a difference in focus. Certainly in a school library, you will see children doing many of the same things done at a public library. Children using card catalogs, finding books not only for reference but also for enjoyable reading, finding out how you go about getting things in a library, finding out the important research things which are available in libraries. In addition, the sort of fun resources, the pleasurable books, movies, and film strips that might be available in the library. Additionally, I guess you could say that the librarian's function is very similar, with some differences in focus. Certainly one of the basic roles of a school librarian is to interest and stimulate the children into reading, assisting them to read by finding appropriate books, books which would be at a level at which the children could handle in terms of reading ability, books of interest to the children in terms of their hobbies and skills. But I think more critical to the purpose of a school librarian are two other functions, and to the school itself. One, I think that a school librarian has a very prime responsibility in terms of teaching the children, we use the jargon term library skills, those knowledges and skills and abilities which are necessary to use a library as a reference tool.
I think that's always a problem in our town. Again, having been here early on, was a great problem where they would say, don't have a school library, use the public library, but there's a tremendous difference between them where the school library really, in fact, is geared for the curriculum at school and is quite special, just like a library at a university. Well, I'd like to thank both of you for making, I think, what seems to be a somewhat baffling subject somewhat more understandable, and I want to thank everybody for watching. Next Wednesday, September the 8th, will be the first day of school, and we're all geared up and ready for it. And I'd like to welcome back the staff and students and wish them well for new year. And I hope they have a very good year. And again, thank you very much. And thank you for listening and watching. Good evening.